Hey, it's Kevin here. Before we start the episode, I wanted to mention that our final live show recording of the season is December 13th. It'll be extra festive and extra cheesy. So grab those tickets from the link in our show notes, and we'll see you there. You surface from the underground at Piccadilly Circus,
Mind the gap.
making your way through the glittering lights of London's West End. You take a turn down a quaint-looking street into the notorious neighborhood of Soho, and you arrive at our intimate cafe. Welcome to The Big Smoke, a live recorded variety show podcast. My name is Kevin Bennett. I'll be your guide through this experience of comedy, conversation, and community. In this episode, you'll hear something a little different from our usual fare. Every once in a while, we thought it would be fun to explore the Big Smoke, inviting guests to join us virtually from all around the world. So, we decided to dive deep into what we call the three pillars of our show: comedy, conversation, and community. To start with, you'll hear from Aidan Parker in Vancouver, Canada. Aidan is a writer, filmmaker, and award-winning member of the Canadian improv community. Guiding me through some of his favorite improvisation exercises, he will help us understand how improv techniques can be applied to our everyday lives. Don't forget, with this one you can pause and play along. We then hear from Amber Teterissa, who's in Amstelveen in the Netherlands. Amber is a communication coach and trainer who works with commercial, government, and nonprofit organizations, as well as being an actor and director for Dutch theater, film, and television. Amber and I will be having a conversation about conversations. Our trip around the world then makes its way back to the UK, where we hear from Rishi Rian, who will serenade our ears with his poetic exploration of one man's search for connection through community. All this and more during our trip around the big smoke we call the world. But first, it's time to play Stump the Room. For this episode, we are traveling to Canada for our Stump the Room challenge. The popular board game Trivial Pursuit was created in 1979 in Montreal, Canada, by two Canadian friends, Chris Haney, a photo editor from Montreal's The Gazette, and Scott Abbott, a sports editor for the Canadian Press. After finding pieces of their Scrabble game missing, they decided to create their own game. Combining their love of trivia with a playful competitive spirit, they spent hours writing questions that covered a wide variety of topics, from sports and history to pop culture and geography. One of the original questions from their sports and leisure category was, what is the largest diamond in the world? Have you been stumped? You'll find the answer at the end of the episode.
Are we in? Am I in? Hello?
You are in!
Hey! Hello!
How are you?
Good. How's it going?
It's first thing in the morning for Aidan.
It is first thing in the morning. I'm on 1.5 coffees.
Okay, let's start here. So I want you to kind of take the lead with this. I mean, I'm going to have lots of questions and things along the way, but what are you going to do today, Aidan?
Okay, as you told me, you want to have an exploration of like comedy. And so you came to me, an improviser, which is hilarious because
And
I don't consider
comedian,
myself
comedy
and,
writer,
yeah, we'll
funny
get
person,
to
big fan of comedy, all those things.
Yes, exactly. That's true. But I'm actually more so than comedy, obsessed with community and conversation. And so I'm going to be
Ooh.
doing my best to swing this comedy-based conversation into the world of just community and conversation itself, because I think that
All
those
right.
things are so linked. But what I'm excited about is getting you, Kevin, to do improv. And so I have a couple exercises and games and things that we can try. And in doing so, maybe kind of pull back the curtain on what goes into doing improv, improvised theater, improvised comedy.
In terms of improv, do you want to just briefly tell us a little bit about the work that you do so that we kind of have some context, and then you can throw me in?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll give a quick kind of overview of what improv is, and then kind of talk through how it became such a big part of my life. Improv, obviously short for improvisation. You can call it improv, you can call it impro, you can call it improvised theater, you can call it improvised comedy. They're not necessarily the same thing, but it's this kind of umbrella term for when a performer is creating a show on the spot, following inspiration from the audience and potentially their scene partners. This is obviously fun because you're watching kind of the creative process in real time. A lot of the time, people, when you talk about like improv, like, oh, it's like, whose line is it anyway, or something like that. That's kind of a very good like touch point. I would say as a medium as a whole, like bare bones definition, the purpose is to create an engaging and cohesive story that the audience is invested in, that the performers are creating together. I started getting into this world like 13 years ago. I started with the Canadian Improv Games, which is a high school nationwide tournament where, a bunch of nerdy theater kids perform 4-minute scenes against local high schools, and then they're judged. And the better you do, the more shows you get to do over the course of the season, culminating in a national tournament in Ottawa, our nation's tiny capital. That was a really cool experience because we got to, I went from never doing anything unscripted to performing these short scenes with other students from around the country. And it was so cool to go from kind of the regional side of things where, there's a very distinct flavor to seeing the performances of like high school students from truly across the country and them being so different. And that was kind of the first time where I was like, oh, there really isn't like a hard box or line around what improv is or can look like. And to see at such a young age and at such a foundational level that diversity of creativity already start to spark was very inspiring for me.
You said there was all these different schools across the country and they all did it differently. Was there anything in the competition that like everybody had to do X, or what made it improv there? Like how did people prove it was improv and not just a scene they were doing? Like did you walk on stage and then the audience told you what to do, or paint that picture just a little bit for us?
The way that the tournament is built is that there are 4 types of scenes that each team will play in a night. And that's a choice of 4 out of 5 possible scenes, or they call them events. Each scene is 4 minutes long. And each scene is created to foster mastery over a specific skill within the toolbox of improv, right? So one of them is a story event. And so in 4 minutes, teams are asked to create an improvised story. And then there's a character event where you're asked to showcase as best you can a character trait. Then you have your theme event, which is in 4 minutes, use scenes and, performance to explore a theme from as many different angles as you can. Then you have a life event, which is to create a grounded representation of life experience in some way. So the point of that one, obviously, now is we're moving away from like silly bits and like jokes to like, oh, can you improvise in a space where you're actually taking it seriously? You're committing to it. And then the last one is style, which is the most open. And that's basically do a scene in the style of anything of your choosing, in which case you present your own conventions. So if it's a genre piece, like people have done Dr. Seuss and like, okay, it must have like made up rhymes. It must have some loose moral, and it must have like made up words. What's cool about improv is that it can only be done because of the audience and with the audience.
Tell us now a little bit about kind of the post-high school improv, just to complete your story a bit before we dive into your first game or exercise.
Sure. Yeah. So while I was in high school and doing Canadian Improv Games, I was also attending something called Improv Camp, which is a 7-day retreat on a little island off British Columbia where people from across Canada and the United States, like 200 kids would come, and they're just all obsessed with improv and they're obsessed with comedy. And then we're taught by some of the greatest improvisers across North America. And some of them would be, international as well, or cross-continental. And that was amazing because then suddenly I'm going from a place of like, oh, there are kids around the country who are doing the same thing as me in very different ways to, oh, now there are adults who are teaching me skills that I've never heard of from cities I never realized have such rich communities. And it was so cool to see that on this island, all those, call them what you want, delegates or whatever, these teachers also had such a strong connection, such a strong community. It was kind of this weird confirmation bias of like, wow, it seems like everyone who touches this art has a real passion for engaging with each other regardless of where they're coming from, because they're all speaking the same sort of language.
Do you think anything? I was just thinking about like why this is appealing, and obviously you're talking about community, and I mean, it just sounds like a great fun gathering of people. But is there any like I can't think of the word like self-flagellation or something? There's something about because I imagine like walking on stage and having no lines is like that's the sort of nightmare that people have. I'm on stage naked, or I don't know what to say, or I forgot my lines in the school play, or whatever. And it's almost something I can't remember the term for it, but it's something like self-sabotage in a weird way. It's like you enjoy the pain of walking. Is there something about that in it? Like a sort of enjoyment of the uncomfortableness of that, like walking into the space of unknown?
I think there's definitely a trend of finding people who are willing to live in that zone of risk. There's so many stories of like people who do extreme sports, who after some
Yeah.
injury or another are like, oh, what's gonna get me that high again? And
Yeah,
then
it
they
puts
find
you
improv and
so
they're
in the
like,
moment.
whoa,
Yeah.
yeah. And so there's definitely a bit of that adrenaline
Mm,
rush. I don't know that that's what keeps people in though. I
mm.
think I think perhaps that's like people who do improv, at least for myself, like you still feel that risk, you feel that bit of adrenaline from doing something like that, but I don't know that it comes from a place of, oh, I'm torturing myself on stage because I don't know what I'm going to do, as
Yeah.
much as it comes from a place of, oh, I get to be fully present and I get to do the thing that I love. I think that what improv does do really well is it really teaches you to have a healthy relationship with failure. You will fail. You're going up there, and every possible thing that could be set up to make something go wrong is set up. You have a paying audience. You are there with people whose brains you can't read. You are there under the guise of entertaining. You maybe have tech and lights that make people think, oh, this is similar to theater, something very
Right.
polished,
They
right?
practice this all up. They know all their
Yeah,
lines. Yeah.
exactly, right? And then you are told to create essentially something from nothing,
Mm,
and it's entirely independent from your preparation in some way, right?
mm,
So the risk factor, like the chance for failure is high. It's huge that it will happen in small ways and in big ways, right? And if you're someone who is very afraid of failure, if someone who has a strong reaction to failure, I think doing some improv will be very beneficial for you. But I also think that that's something that if you have, it will also be challenging. I think improv is a great way to counter that because you learn that most of the time that you're failing is necessary, right? All of those small failures actually add up to something much more important. And the value of each failure is entirely decided by you. But I think if you're not comfortable with failing, you're never going to open your mouth in improv because you're always going to be looking for the perfect word. Del Close, who was another kind of founding thinker of improv, and he was, I believe, one of the founders of like IO Improv Olympic. He talks about how like it's important in improv to like fall first, and then figure out what to do on the way down.
yeah. Okay. So much to say. Should we dive into the first? What do you think?
It's a pretty good segue there.
Take me into something?
Yeah. All right.
I'll also say for context for any
Yeah.
listeners, like I don't do improv. I think I did one improv class in high school or something like that. There was an improv team in my first high school, but it didn't really go very far. So I think I went to like one practice. I might have even gone to a competition, but I blocked it out of my memory. So
Mhm.
I am like a theater person. Anyone who listens to the podcast knows that, but I love structure. So this is the thing that I think is interesting. I mean, and I'm sure there is structure to this, but I think, yeah, there's some really beautiful life lessons in what you're talking about in terms of being comfortable with failure. So I am ready to dive in, but I am not a pro. So tell me what to do.
Amazing. So obviously I've been doing improv for a long time. I've also been teaching it for about a decade, right? And my philosophy when I go into it is I want not to approach it from the perspective of I know improv, you don't, let me teach you how to make things up, but rather from the perspective of I have the comfort and confidence in this space to create a situation where you forget that you don't know how to do it because the reality is you do know how to improvise. Everyone knows how to improvise. You are, presenting an eloquent conversation for your audience right now that you haven't entirely scripted. And indeed, you have a structure, but you're very much taking your inspiration and your leads from me. And you're thinking, oh, what does the audience need to hear? And so there's so many elements already of improv that you are showing mastery of. And I think that for everyone listening to this, you engage every day in elements of improv, but because you're not putting the pressure on yourself to be funny, or you're not putting the pressure on yourself of having an audience or of getting it right or of being judged as being someone who knows what they're doing, it doesn't get in the way and you don't notice it. And so if anything, what I hope to do with some of these games is to show you that you already actually know how to do this and then give you the confidence to admit it.
Great. So here we go. I'm ready. Cool.
So all you got to do is, and typically you do this walking around a space. Obviously you're plugged into your headset. That's okay. Look around your room, point at things with precision, and aloud name what they are. So I'm sitting at my desk now. If I were to do it, I would point at my mug and say mug. I'd point at my keyboard and say keyboard. I'd point at this water bottle and say water bottle. The challenge that I will offer is to try and develop as fluent a rhythm as possible. So mug, keyboard, mouse, water bottle, battery, something like this.
But I'm trying to keep the pace the same as much as I
trying to
can.
keep
Okay,
the pace
I'm going to
you
go slower
can.
than that. Do you want me to go? Should I do it? Okay.
And go.
Picture frame, mug, watch, speaker, lamp, Christmas decoration, plant, other headphones, pencil,
Amazing. There you go. We
pen.
did it. It's easy. We don't got to do it that long to really express it.
People know I have Christmas decorations up already.
Okay, so that's super easy. How did that feel for you?
Good, because I just had to look at the thing and say what it was, and I could make my own pace. So I didn't really feel like, ooh, I don't know what to say, because the thing was right there.
And you'd be forgiven for saying it's a little bit boring.
Sure, it's a little, if you made me do it for a long time, it would probably be boring. I was definitely wondering for a second, like, I hope he decides when I stop, because I'm just going to keep going until he tells me to stop. But it could be. I wouldn't say that I'd pay to watch that in a show.
All right, we're going to play level 2 now. So I'll give the instruction, and then when I say go, if you're listening, if you want, you can pause it, you can try it out. This one's similar, but there's a twist. This time, when you begin, the first thing you point at, you will say nothing. The second thing you point at, you will name it, just as you did before.
Yeah.
But you're going to name it the name of the thing you previously pointed to.
Okay.
From there, you continue to play as you did before, following a rhythm as best as you can, but always naming the item the name of the previous thing you pointed to.
So if you're listening along and you want to play, now's the time to pause and do this while I nervously get ready. Okay. And it doesn't have to be the same things. There's completely
No,
different,
you have a full room in front of you, or a sidewalk, wherever you're listening.
Yeah, exactly. Tell me when. Am I good to go?
And go.
Christmas cards, wallet, picture frame, mug, window.
And see if you can increase your rhythm.
Pumpkin, plant, newspaper. No, I just said newspaper and I pointed at a newspaper. I meant to say book.
Oh no! Well done. You failed.
I got it
and that's okay. That was really great. How did that feel?
Okay, well, I felt a lot more tension, as you could probably tell in my voice.
Yeah.
I mean, it was fun because I was doing that little puzzle in my brain every time. I had to really, really quickly do the puzzle. I guess I don't know what happened when I screwed it up. I think it's like I started kind of overthinking or something like that. But it was more fun, I'll say, because it's that constant, it's sort of like, patting your head and rubbing your stomach at the same time or whatever. It's a little bit of trying to do juggling a little bit. So you get a little bit of that fun from the kind of juggle. And it's also a simple task. Do you know what I mean? So it's not like completely overwhelming.
Okay, lastly, we'll do level 3. This time, just as before, you'll be pointing at objects in your space and you will be naming them. This time, you can name them anything you like, so long as it is not the correct name for the thing. All right, are you ready?
Okay, so pointing at objects, but they can be, I have to say, something other than them. So if you're listening along, now's the time to pause. Try it out. See how it is. Okay.
Go.
Mug, paper, Christmas ornament, coin. Sorry. Right away, I just started not being able to do it.
That's
I
great.
found
Okay,
that
try
one.
to get into it.
Do you want me to try it again? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Pen, bubble gum, TV, pillow, chair, bubble gum.
I'm gonna
Did I
pause
already
you. This
say
is
bubble gum?
no. You're doing great, and you have a really good rhythm. Here's
Oh
the
yeah,
thing.
I
Part of
forgot
your
the rules.
rhythm that you've discovered is saying the word in between every single
I
thing you
know.
say.
I
And I
actually
don't know if you
noticed
noticed it.
that.
It's
I
word,
100% noticed
word,
it. I thought,
word.
should I not try the ums?
Let's see what happens if you focus on just saying the words.
Picture frame, pumpkin, book, watch, plant. I pointed to plant, and then I'll admit what I just did. I was about to say plant, so I like quickly moved my hand up to the book and was like, "The book is a plant." Okay,
Amazing. Okay, well,
I
we'll call that
started.
there. Give us a round of applause. That was great. A little pat on the back.
Yay! This is me
You're the perfect
clapping.
person for this, Kevin, because you're kind of live dissecting what my debrief typically would be. Anyway, so real quick, how did that feel overall?
So that round I found the hardest because the second round, which was saying the thing that I pointed to previous to that, it was like it had a structure that I could, in a weird way, I could sort of tense myself and hold on to that thing. As long as it's like juggling, as long as I have this. Whereas the last one felt completely free. It was still a mind fuck. Like it was still a mind thing. Unlike the first one, which is just literally saying the objects. But it was almost too free. It started to become easier when I kind of invented little rules. Like I started going, I would point at the windowsill, but I would see out of the corner of my eye the curtains.
Mhm.
So I'd go curtains. Like I started kind of inventing its own little structure in a way. And I don't know if
Yeah,
that's, I mean, there were no rules. So I guess as long as
yeah,
it wasn't the thing, that helped
yeah.
me. Because as soon as, like when I was saying, like, for example, I have no bubble gum in this room. So when I said that a
Mhm.
couple of times, that literally was, or candy, that was literally just what popped into my head. Whereas when I said like Christmas ornament, I could sort of see it, but then I was pointing at something else. So I was like
Mhm,
finding
mhm.
a way to kind of like, I guess I was finding the avenue for my brain to make it a little bit
Cool.
easier.
And did you continue that hack, I guess we'll call it, up until we ended?
No, I probably that's what probably stopped me and made me laugh because I was sort of
Oh.
doing the hack, but not
Uh-huh.
like, now this is the hack. I'm gonna do it. I guess if there was a pressure and it was like, keep going until I tell you stop, I probably would have gone back into it. But
Mhm.
because I didn't really have the time in my brain to like justify that I'm allowed to do the hack and all these things, I sort of slid into it sometimes. I was like, ooh, this works. And then I would like maybe try not to do it, which is what ultimately made me kind of screw up.
Amazing. Okay, so I love this game because the first question I always ask is which version was hardest for you? And it will
Mhm.
always split the room. Some people find that level 2 is the hardest. Some people find level 3 is the hardest. Level 1
Really?
typically isn't hard.
Wow. That I'm
Yeah,
actually surprised at that because I thought it's obvious to me, at least my
yeah.
brain, that level 3 is. So I'd be really interesting if anyone was playing along while they're listening,
Mhm.
pausing, if they thought level 2 was more difficult.
And I'm going to attempt to diagnose why that might be the case.
Yeah, okay.
So this game typically, I think, originally is an exercise in observation, an exercise in creativity, and things like that. What I really take from it is kind of a metaphor for improv in general, but also an exploration of like your own relationship with like failure and pressure. I'll diagnose like kind of what you're saying, which is that the first version was much easier. The second version was much harder. So
Do you
level
mean
one, what
2
is
and 3, or are you
sorry,
talking
yeah,
about 1?
two and three. Sorry,
Okay.
two and three, two
So
and three.
1 is just like a warm up in a way,
One is a warm up. It's getting us
giving you
familiar
the
with
sort
the
of structure of what you're
momentum.
doing,
Yeah.
getting used to pointing.
It's also nice to just observe things, you know?
Yes.
It's also, I think, necessary because it is boring, right? And it reminds you that, like, okay, at any point you could be doing level 1. Aren't you glad you're not? So if you are the person, Kevin, for example, where the third version, where you're pointing at things and you call them anything but the right name, is
Yeah.
harder than the version where you're pointing at something and calling it the name of the previous thing, it might indicate that you're the kind of person who is more comfortable in a situation where there is one right answer, but an infinite number of wrong answers, and less comfortable in a situation where there is an infinite number of right answers and only one wrong answer. That's essentially the difference between these two versions, meaning there's infinite right answers.
So I point to a
Nothing
mug
you
and I
say
can
would
say
be wrong.
anything but mug.
Exactly. And so mug is the only wrong answer. So that's a situation where there's an infinite number of right answers. You can say anything in the world, any word, but mug, and yet you found that more challenging than the version before, where you point at something and you have to name it the name of the previous thing. And that is the only one right answer. And there's infinite number of wrong answers. And that's typical because that's the way that we've been conditioned academically in society and everything, to know that there's the right thing to say, there's one right way to do things, you have to do something as you're told and instructed, and any deviation from that, any expression beyond that, is inherently wrong. And so there's a weird sense of comfort we feel from being restricted, right?
Now, question. I also had a little made up rule in my head when I was going that you never said, but which was if I got it wrong, the game stopped. Is that what you would do? Or because I was just thinking, like, I guess another thing that might have made it flow more for me in a way is if and this is just, I'm thinking about what this says about me maybe, or people who are playing the game. I assumed as soon as I got it wrong, it was like the buzzer. Okay, you have to stop. So that created a whole other pressure. Instead of going like, okay, if I play the last game and I get it wrong every once in a while, but I keep going. The object is to just keep doing it and you notice it. So that was kind of a like, was I supposed to stop, or would you have let me keep going if I got it
I
wrong?
would have let
Not
you
that
keep
you'd be able
going.
to know,
I mean,
but
typically there'd be like 8 to 20 of you in a room all walking around
yeah,
cacophonously
you
doing this
can't tell.
exam.
Well,
So
you
I
can't
don't know
tell
when you
now.
fail.
I'm pointing out at the screen.
Well, that's
My
the other thing is only like,
yeah.
I don't know if you fail, but I would let you keep going because we're so conditioned to think that failure and success are equal outcomes when you
Mm,
attempt something. And that's why you think, oh, when I fail, it's over. I've stopped. Did I
right, the
succeed
game is
or did I
over.
fail?
Yeah,
But the game is to play the game, right? And so the only way to succeed at it is simply to just do it, which you were the whole time. And the failure was only a moment of that repetition of success, but also the defeat is when you fail and think, oh, well, it's game over. The game is failing and then moving forward.
okay, this is brilliant. So, I wanted to ask you one more question before maybe we slide into something else. I'm thinking of the listener who's never gonna do improv, or the listener who didn't grow up a theater person or acting or any of those sort of things, that these are worlds that you and I exist in.
Mhm.
How could someone integrate this into their life, and why would they?
Amazing. A very good question. So, a lot of my students and the organizations that I teach with, my students are not performers. They're not comedians. They're not actors or improvisers. They're people who are seeking something, whether it's community or a adaptable skill or anything else. I think that through improv, you can in your daily life learn to trust your impulses. You can be more comfortable and adaptable when inevitably things don't go according to plan. You can learn to listen more attentively. You can learn to prioritize the people around you in conversation. You can observe that building with positivity and embracing what's in front of you is always more constructive than trying to come up with your own contribution independent of what's on the table. And these are all very transferable skills that whether you are a team member, a team leader, a community leader, a speaker, a friend, these are all things that will allow you and the people around you to incorporate a new level of comfort and exploration as you
I love
interact
it.
with the world.
Should we try another one?
Sure. I mean, a lot of these make great like road trip card games. So if you're on a road trip, feel free to pull these out. This is once again similar to kind of where we were before, is reminding us that in improv, and this touches on the whole comedy aspect of it too, it doesn't matter what you say. It's so unimportant that you say something clever. It's so unimportant that you be interesting. And that's kind of where we get back to this conversation of being comfortable in mediocrity, which is like be average, right?
Mm,
Be obvious. Because the comedy will never come from you delivering a perfect setup and punchline
mm,
because there's always going to be a better punchline if you had taken the one you started with and then, oh, what if you tweaked it a bit and tweaked it a bit and tweaked it a bit and made it better and better and better? And that's just writing. The reason why improv is funny is because it's unpolished. The reason why improv is funny is because it's honest and it's true. You have genuine reactions and you're watching someone react and respond in real time. Meaning, in a way, the actual recipe for comedy in improv comes from the fact that it is improvised. And that's not something that you're necessarily bringing to the table as any individual. That's something that simply exists baked into the medium. This next game is called Word Ball. And I'm sure you've played it before. There's a version of it.
I play Word Ball all the time. I have no idea what it is.
All right. As we're doing this, similar to the last one, I want to remind you that you don't have to be interesting. You just have to partake. We're going to go back and forth, and together we're going to build a rhythm. I will say a word, and all you have to do is say the first word that comes into mind after I say my word. And then I'll do the same, and we'll go back and forth. It's essentially word association, but I don't want to put the pressure of there being any discernible association to it. Your brain is unable to not associate.
Whatever you say,
I don't need to know what it is.
Great.
Exactly. Yeah. All right.
Okay. What is it called again? Word Ball. Okay.
Word Ball. Yeah. Okay.
Hang
so
on,
I'll go first, and then you'll jump in.
You'll go first, then I'll jump in. Here we go.
Flower.
Banana.
Peel.
Brown.
Yellow.
Stinky? I don't know.
Coffee.
Smell.
Rose.
Garden.
Leaf.
Blower.
Wind.
Rain.
Fall.
Autumn.
Season.
Cloudy.
Rainy.
Day.
Night.
Stars.
Nice. Okay, now all the psychologists listening along will be like, "Oh, that one's a psychopath."
We won't say which one.
Again, these games are not supposed to be groundbreaking. They're not supposed to be hard. They're supposed to be easy, right? But they're supposed to be easy in a way that you don't often allow yourself to demonstrate. I think once again, we're just going to the place where, like the last one, anything you say is fine. In fact, anything you say is fine. There's not even a wrong answer this time. And so we're trying to limit the self-censorship. We're also trying to not be interesting. And that's where the association comes in. You're not trying to say barnacle when someone said, something totally unrelated, because you're not trying to get a reaction. You're just trying to, all you need from me is for me to say anything, and then you can move on with the game. All I need from you is for you to say anything. But if you hesitate or judge or censor, I'm not getting the only thing I need from you, which is participation.
Yeah, I'm not trying to make a story. I'm not trying to obstruct and do the opposite, though I would imagine sometimes those types of things come in.
Yeah, but also we can't help but create stories, right? We're creating an image of this garden and rain and leaves and things like that, and that is sort of a world that we're creating, whether or not you're imagining that. We're doing it kind of by accident, and that's where the rest of improv comes in. Okay, this next version of Word Ball is one of my favorites of all time.
So this is like the next level of Word Ball.
Yeah. It's the next level. I call it, and I think other people call it, chips.
Chips. Okay.
Chips.
Okay. But this is
in
connected.
This version,
We're not moving on to a different one.
This is connected.
Okay,
this is very connected.
Yeah.
So we're doing the exact same thing. We're going to say a word and then say the first word that comes to mind after hearing that word. Here's the twist. The word that you finish saying will not be the word that you started saying.
Oh my God. Okay.
So you will take as much time as you need to transform that initial word into a new word. So for example, if you said mug and I would associate to coffee, right? I would start by saying coffee. I'd say cough, but then during that, I try to find something else it could be. Cause. There we go. Cause is the word.
Oh, geez.
And if you need to milk the vowel for that long,
okay. I thought of cough drops right away when you said that, but yeah.
All right, we get it. You're better at improv than me, Kevin.
I'm not. Because
actually,
I had no pressure on me.
Way faster than you thought of
I was
cause.
Like, are you gonna say cough drop? For God's sakes, no. When the pressure's not on. Okay. Oh gosh, I'm not. This is gonna be hard. Okay, I'm ready.
Are you ready? I'll give you the first word just clean, and then from there we can start associating and changing. All right, your first word is cough drop.
Sunshine.
Railing.
Stanley.
Parlay.
Taunt.
Mail.
Police.
Con.
Ronald McDonald.
Amazing. There you go. You give yourself a pat on
Okay,
the
that
back,
was
whatever.
as hard as I thought it was going to be.
Not as hard as you think it's going to be. The most important thing is that you're trusting your impulse and saying a word right away. That's where the rhythm comes from. The fluency comes from you following your impulse immediately, not from you achieving any type of result, right? Like the risk that you're taking is saying a word knowing that you're not allowed to finish it, rather than trying to sort the puzzle out in your head beforehand and then presenting a fake version of discovery, right?
So we got word ball into Cheops. Should we do another one? Should we jump
Sure.
to a...
This is a game that has as many names as any other. Sometimes it's called darts. Sometimes it's called middle word. Sometimes it's called connections. I call it darts because that was the first way that I learned it, but I often cycle between them. This is also a great road trip game. I saw people on like Instagram, like TikTok, like playing this, which I was like, oh my God, that's so fun. I never saw it outside of the context of an improv room. But our goal, and this is again chasing failure, but it's also developing like mind meld, cooperation, and like collaboration, and trying to get into the mind of your partner.
Darts. I'm ready.
Darts. Yeah. On the count of 3, both of us will say any word. When that happens, we'll have 2 different words. After that, we'll count down from 3 and say 2 more words. Our goal in this game is to say the same word at the same time. The way that we will achieve this is after every pair of different words are said, we will both try to think what is the one word that encapsulates both words equally. And I'll add the guideline that we don't want to repeat words that have already been said.
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
Do we count down or what?
Yeah. So for every word, we'll count down from 3. We'll just both say our words on 1, even though for me, it might come a second later or something like that. We'll just trust the timing you hear. All right. Are you ready?
Okay. Yeah.
3, 2, 1. Cloud.
Snow. You said cloud?
Whoa. Yeah, that's already pretty close.
Okay.
All right. So what is a word that kind of captures or fits both of those?
Cloud and snow. Okay.
Yeah. 3, 2, 1. Weather.
Winter.
All right. Are you ready?
So now
Winter
we think of that.
and weather.
Okay.
3, 2, 1.
Cold.
Whoa!
Can we both say cold?
Yes! We did. All right. That was amazing. And so that listeners, that was our first attempt at that. That wasn't like we edited.
We're not editing this in. Like we're so much better.
That was really cool. And it doesn't matter that it's 3 rounds, right? But it's really cool that it was. And oftentimes I'll play this with new groups and it can take 20 or 30 rounds because it happens in 1 round. It's just as important to place as little importance on getting it quickly as it is and getting it further apart. I think this is just a great game to trust your instincts and also try to think what might my partner's instincts be, right? If you're being interesting, you're trying to say something clever, you're trying to make a cool connection or show off a piece of trivia that only you know, it's very unlikely that your partner will get to the same place as you.
Yeah.
And with the scenes, with improv, with all of
this,
if you're trying to stand out, if you're trying to be funny, trying to be clever, you're not actually going to achieve any type of cohesive collaboration.
Why do you call it darts, by the way?
Because it's like you're trying to hit the bullseye. Yeah.
Oh, I see. We're both trying to hit the bullseye kind of thing. Do you have any examples of maybe someone that you taught in a class, whether it was a young person or an adult or whatever, where either in the class or maybe after they took the class and did certain exercises, it helped them in some way outside of the context of doing improv, whether it be maybe someone who told you later on, this really helped me with X, or just something that you saw even in the moment with someone? I'm curious. I'm
Hmm.
always interested in these parallels,
Hmm.
into other avenues. Part of the variety show concept that we're creating is to showcase lots of different types of people. But yeah, I wondered
Oh,
about
I
that.
do. I actually have a really sweet one. And this happened a couple years ago. I was teaching at improv camp, running a workshop, and we have, students who are there for a full week. Their ages like 13 to 17. And I was teaching like a two-part workshop. I think this specific one was on failure, and failure, using improv to teach failure essentially. And by teaching failure, I mean like building comfort with it, understanding the need for it, the value of it, the inevitability of it, and recontextualizing the way that we experience defeat when faced with failure, right? And persevering through it, which is how we build good improvisers, I think. There was a student who, and I won't give too many details about them, but I didn't know this at the time. And I knew they had some, specific accessibility needs that made their participation look slightly different from other students. But at the end of the workshop series, they came up to me and they were very emotional, and they just said, "Hey, I want to like thank you very much, essentially just kind of for what we learned, what we did." And I learned that and this is a young, like 16, 15, 16 years old, and like 2 years ago had been involved in a severe accident that left them with a significant amount of lasting trauma, both like physical, but also mental and a little bit cognitive as well. And they described just like how the recovery process has just been a series of failures and a series of like defeats of trying to do things and failing and losing momentum, losing motivation. And they just expressed that like it was in that workshop that was the first time that they were excited to fail again, and they were excited to like try doing things again. They're like, and it's just really recontextualizing like it's like just because like I can't do things right, it's like it's more important that I keep doing them, and like I zoom out and like change the way that I'm prioritizing whatever. Obviously they were not saying it as academically as I'm using this
Mm.
language, but it was really sweet, and it was really motivating for me as well. And that's the student that I remember after all these years, not the one who made the best joke in class, not the
Yeah.
one who achieved failure the best or whatever. And I'm sure for every student they had some takeaway that was equally valuable. And I don't want to discredit their contribution, but obviously I remember because this one was shared with me directly.
Mm.
But that really sat with me. That felt really nice. But it also, I think, is just a reminder that like yes, we live in a world where it is important to be correct in many ways. But I think that we also live in a world where there's so many situations and worlds where all that matters is that we partake, not how we do, but what we do.
I find it very moving as well because I was thinking about this student of yours, and the progress may be feeling really slow at times or whatever the recovery
Mhm.
is. And I'm thinking about anything in life that we are trying to achieve or strive for, and you're never going to get there unless it's always a series of failures. And so
Mhm.
learning that is so hard to grasp that, and giving that to someone is a real gift. I think one of the last observations I just wanted to make, you were talking about comedy and improv and not trying to be funny, or that's not what it's about, or how for
Mhm.
you there's links to the other pillars, conversation and community. And it makes me think of something that I think of when I do plays, historical plays and Shakespeare, and I love looking at rituals of storytelling and gatherings and all these different things. Comedy, when I think of a historical perspective, was not necessarily funny all the time, but it was a structure that meant new life,
Mhm.
breathing new life into something. Whereas tragedy meant sort of a reminder that things come to an end. The cycle always ends, things die. So classic, with Shakespeare, everybody knows at the end of a tragedy, everybody dies. And the sort of joke is at the end of all Shakespeare comedies, everyone gets married. If anyone knows any of the Midsummer Night's Dream or any of the famous comedies, it always ends in all these marriages. but it's actually because marriage at that time always represented new life and children and new beginnings and fresh starts. So I think there's something really beautiful about what you're saying and the empowerment that you can give to people, whether it be that kid who was going through recovery in that instance, or anybody listening to this conversation now, that comedy and or improv can be looked at as something that can actually breathe new life or inspiration into you and sort of propel you forward in whatever you're
Mhm.
doing, which is maybe a nice way to frame it. So something that I do in every episode is I ask people for their parish notices, and that is the
Mhm.
term that we use for any way recently or in the coming weeks that you are using to find community and connection, to foster that within your own life. So, do you have any parish notices for us?
Oh, I do. Tomorrow night, I'm gonna go to a karaoke birthday party for someone who I'm excited to be building a friendship with,
Nice.
which is always nice. And so that's a whole new community of people there. And that's gonna be fun because who doesn't absolutely love karaoke? And then on Tuesday, I'm like spending 4 hours, 5 hours at a center in Surrey, British Columbia, that welcomes extremely recent refugees to Canada to help their transition before they enter the school system, right? So a big part of it is like language proficiency, and another part of it is just simply just like adjustment period and understanding like what you can expect. And I've been working with them for a few years now to go in and essentially use these games and improv and stuff like that to, in my mind, to make them have fun. But
Mm,
there's obviously a lot of other, secret goals and things, such as like reminding them that like what it feels like to have confidence in communication, regardless of language proficiency, to engage in artistic expression with each other, and to understand that you know maybe they want to take a drama class in high school, and that's a door that they can choose to walk through or not walk through, but that is their choice ultimately. Those are
amazing.
some of my favorite classes to teach because we're not like gearing up for a show or anything. So we really can just
Mm,
like chase the fun and like play silly improv games. And like I take my favorite games and try to adapt them so that it really doesn't matter what is said or in what language it's said. And it's just like I've never had more languages in any one room than in these classes. And it's really
amazing.
cool to see this kind of global community coming together to be open and to be silly and to learn to be comfortable failing in front of each other.
Well, I was gonna say, I can't think of a better person for those young people to, who are new to Canada to have an experience with and to bring them in. I think they're going to have an amazing time. And just before we wrap up, I'm so happy that we were able to do this. Obviously, our friendship and connection means a lot to me. And I've known you since you were 15, I think, or
Is that
14 or something
crazy?
like that.
Yeah, something crazy like
Crazy.
that.
And now you're all grown up and I'm a lot older. But I definitely think, yeah, like I'm always very inspired by hearing everything that you say, and our conversations always go on, forever and ever. But it's so fun, and you were a huge lifeline for me during the pandemic and a big inspiration. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much. And I mean, to throw it back to you, Kevin, like I wouldn't really be doing any of this if it wasn't for you either. Because fun fact about Kevin is the first theatrical production I ever did, Kevin, you were my director. And that year, because of that show, someone came up to me and was like, "Hey, have you ever done improv? Like you were great in that show. You should come check out improv." And I was like, "Isn't that the thing that lame people do?" And boy, was I right. Um,
And you were one of those
and
people.
I was one of them. And after years of ego death, I'm
Oh
still
my
doing
gosh.
it.
Oh, amazing. You were so good in that show. Well, yeah. Thank you so much.
Hey, honey.
Amber, oh my God. How are you?
I'm feeling really weird having headphones and my phone in my hand and my
No,
computer here, but I'm
I
good.
know. It's like doing the Dutch factory shows where you have to balance many things at once.
It's like one big impro.
But I knew you'd be able to do it. It's been too long, pre-COVID.
Has it been that long?
Oh my gosh, yes, we need to meet up as soon as we can. Thank you so much for doing this. And what we're doing today is exploring the three pillars of the Big Smoke, which are comedy, conversation, and community. And so when we were thinking of three different people, three different segments, I thought of you for conversation, our second pillar. And it's for a variety of reasons. I mean, obviously, we've worked together in a theatrical sense. I think the work you do and have done with the Dutch Factory Theater Company is very innovative, but also very uncomfortable in a good way for audiences and for actors.
Yeah.
You're asking people to be in unusual situations. And I'm interested in, I was thinking about, I don't know a lot about your work in terms of training, what you do with when you work with non-actors, which is obviously a huge part of your work, your work as a communication coach. So I thought, what better to talk to someone who, you run a theater company, you're an actor, you're a communication coach. Let's have a conversation about conversations,
Great.
About difficult conversations,
Yeah.
about the importance of conversations, or just how conversations come into your daily life and your work.
Yeah.
So I love the first thing I was just thinking of as I was reading up on you, and on your bio it says that you're a communication coach. Can you tell me what that is?
Yes, I can. So what I do is I help people to express themselves in different ways and therefore getting their message across in a clearer way. So it's quite broad. So either it's leaders within companies that need to communicate a message, right? Like, for example, there's change. So how do I communicate change to a bigger group of people and how does it impact them? So that's on a bigger level. But also within teams, how am I heard within a team, right? You have team dynamics. Some people speak up, some people don't. So I teach them the different ways to express themselves, but also to stay curious, because I think one of the things as a communication coach or trainer, for me, it's also to really listen to understand. So can I listen to different people, to different opinions in order to understand where they're coming from and then decide whether I agree or disagree and then voice my own thoughts and opinions. So that's what I help people to do, that I help people to give feedback. I help people to tell stories. I help people to set boundaries.
You mentioned getting their message or story across in a clearer way. I would imagine that in many ways people are resistant, or this is an uncomfortable thing, because if they're having a communication problem or breakdown or issue, you're coming in many ways to help kind of push through that. So have you always been comfortable? I guess my first question is, have you always been comfortable in uncomfortable conversations, or is that something you developed over time?
I think I developed over time. I think no, I think I've grown. Like now, I'm in a stage in my career where I actually love to be in uncomfortable situations with a team or with people, because I think that being able to make that explicit. So what often happens is when things start feeling uncomfortable, there's a message that's not being spoken out loud. So being able to voice that and just give attention to that to see what you can do with it is actually helpful to make it less uncomfortable. But of course, when I was a bit younger and I started this work, as I've been doing it for the past 15 to 20 years, it wasn't always easy to feel the mood of the room changing, or to see somebody becoming resistant to a certain approach or to a new technique that they were trying out. And I think when I was younger, I tried to sort of convince people at that point, and I think I've stopped doing that, and therefore it makes it a lot less uncomfortable for me to be in those kinds of situations.
I'm interested, just for the listener who maybe doesn't know what communication coach or training means or is. You obviously talked about it in a broad sense. Can you give us maybe a specific example, whether it's something recent or a long time ago, of maybe a particular type of business or a project and the sort of issue or communication position that they were in that you were brought in to solve, so we get a bit of an idea of what it is?
Yeah. There's many examples, but for example, teams might be a good example, like people working in teams. So I coach a lot of teams at the moment, and companies ask me when their team is not performing to the fullest, or when the leader of the team, or maybe even the board, just sees somehow this team is not really communicating. They're saying things, but it seems like we're not really being able to move forward with each other. We're not achieving our goals. Let's ask somebody from outside to come in to have a conversation to see how can we make decisions in a different way, Or how can we speak up more? Or Amber, my team is not really taking any ownership. And I don't know how come. So can you please work with them to see if they can gain more ownership? That's usually when I come in. And then we start having conversations, first of all, about, so what is ownership? And when would you or would you not take ownership? And building from there to really start listening to the different insights of a specific topic like ownership, or like we've stopped communicating. It seems like people don't care anymore. We say what they have to do and then they do it, but nobody's actually bringing in any ideas. How come? So that's what I'm doing when I'm working with them. It's actually starting and helping the conversations to discover what's actually happening within the team in order to then give them tools to improve on those points.
So what would be the first step? Someone says to you, our team they don't seem motivated, they just do it, and we've sort of lost a sense of morale, or whatever it is that you get prompted with. What would be the first step when you come into that situation?
So for me, if it's a team, I always want to start with intakes, one-on-ones. So I always want to, because if one person says, this is my truth, the real truth lies in the middle somewhere, right? So what I find important in order for everybody to feel heard as well is that I do intakes, one-on-one sessions where I meet the people and they get to know me, start building trust. I'll tell them what the purpose is of what we're doing together, but also to get their insight of how do you think this team can develop, or what do you think is helpful? What do you want to develop yourself? So I really get a good understanding of many people sharing their stories and then sort of drafting the core of what people are saying in order to build the program.
So it starts with individual conversations, back to conversation with those people. Yeah.
Usually that's my approach, because then I want to give everybody the chance to speak up before they are put in a group setting.
Do you find people are pretty, to me, I find you such a warm presence. So it makes sense to me that you're a leader and all of these wonderful things. Do you find, maybe who don't know you, who walk in and, okay, here's the first thing. There's an issue in the company, whatever it is, and now I'm going to do my one-on-one. Is there a lot of resistance usually? Do you have techniques within that first conversation to sort of break them down, make a joke, I don't know, like, do you find that there's a lot of resistance? And if so, how do you kind of break through that in the beginning?
Most of the times people are actually happy because they have a feeling that somebody's listening to them, and somebody that does not have a specific company goal, because I'm an outsider. And of course, there are always people that find it nonsense that we're doing this, or they have a different opinion. And I usually sense it. I mean, their answers will be short, or they're like, well, I don't know why they did this program. And then I'll start the conversation once again. So I'm not ignoring what's happening, because then I'm going to be curious and I'm going to ask, so what is the reason that you don't think this is necessary? And how do you think the team is functioning? And what would your choice be if you could decide to do a training session or to bring in something? Because I think, well, from my experiences, there's always an answer. There's always something hidden, or some sort of message that's not being heard, or some sort of, there's always, people are not just resistant because they're people. People are resistant because of a reason. And if you know that, then you can make better choices. So usually the choice is to just acknowledge that, and sometimes even to add it into a program. I've had it twice in my career where somebody just really did not want to be present, right? But that wasn't a team, that was just learning people's skills to deal with difficult conversations when they have in their job, for example. Well, if people just really do not want to be there, then there's always the choice to leave. But eventually I've only had that twice.
It's interesting because I was just thinking about how, for example, a therapist, they might have a really good sense of how to advise their client. And then it's a bit of a stereotype, but then it's like their own personal life is sort of a mess or something like that. And I was curious, you work in the art of communication. Do you find that we talk about being at ease, being curious. Do you find that this translates outside of the work into personal life, into passion projects, all the other things that you do in terms of difficult conversations and communication? Or do you find it, I'm sure one is easier than the other, but how does it translate, I guess, into the other parts of your life, these skills that you're teaching people?
I was actually asking myself that question because I think we're currently living in a very bizarre world where I think curiosity is one of the things that's missing. That's why there's a lot of different opinions and people stick to it. And I think it's actually helping me in my personal life to stay curious, even when people say things or do things that I find very difficult to understand, to keep telling myself, not only in my work, but also in my private life, just stay curious. You don't have to agree with what people are doing, but it's so helpful to really listen or to ask the questions that I might not have asked like 10 or 15 years ago, because then I had my own opinion. So maybe I have very strong opinions still, but I've become more curious towards other opinions as well, because I think
It's very vulnerable to, sorry, yeah.
No,
I was
go
just
for
thinking it's very vulnerable to sit in a sense of curiosity. You're talking about curiosity is missing in many ways in the world. And I agree. And I was thinking about, well, the parallel with this show is whether it's the live recorded podcast or this, the goal is to bring in 2 or 3 different guests that, you may not, somebody might be following you and interested in your work, whether it be as an actor or communication coach and trainer. But then the other guests that we have on, they might have no sense of who they are or no interest in it. A great example is a month or so ago, we did a show and we had 3 guests. We had a meditation teacher, a freestyle rapper, and a stand-up comedian. And, the freestyle rapper had some fans and people that were coming, but they had no concept of who the comedian and let alone the meditation teacher was.
Yeah.
And this, so trying to encourage this sense of curiosity. But one of the reasons I could see somebody not being curious is because they're blocking themselves in some way, whether it be their pain, they feel pain from it, they feel hurt. How do you, yeah. Well, that wasn't really a question, but I was just thinking
but I agree.
about.
I think what gets in the way of us being curious is usually our own thoughts and assumptions, whether it's pain or a thought or an assumption. Or we often think people know, right? Because they know me, they know what I mean. We don't know what you mean until you say it. It's very simple, but it's so true. We base so many things on assumptions.
I was just thinking also about, I should mention to the listener that I know you run a Shakespeare company. And what's really unique about this company, you do English productions in the Netherlands. But what's really innovative and interesting is it's always in a different location, whether it be someone's backyard or a living room. And the actors are always adapting to that situation. And I was just thinking, the curiosity question and also the something you said earlier about, just the vulnerability of stepping into a space that's unknown. So there's a kind of inherent thing in that, because when you put on a play, often people are learning, I move here, I do this, and you kind of learn the pattern. Whereas what you're doing is the pattern, of course, are the words, but there's so much adaptability. What's the biggest challenge as you navigate difficult conversations and communication, whether it be through the theater company or your work in training?
What did I find the most challenging, difficult conversation?
I'm just thinking, not necessarily specific conversation, but what still challenges you, I guess, is a better question today when it comes to communication. What do you still find?
There's so many things that challenge me. It's asking the right questions. What I find challenging, what's the right question to ask at what moment? It's finding the right balance to say or not say something that you're seeing. I think that's a challenge.
I think that just to hop in on that, finding the right thing to say. I personally find that difficult because I think different brains work in different ways. And I feel like for me, I need to almost audition the thought before I know if that's what it is. So I need to sort of say it. And I know in relationships or friendships I've had in the past where some people need to go away and sort of be quiet and still, and then come back with their ideas. That can be really difficult in terms of communication because we have different wirings in our brain and different communication styles,
Definitely. And different pace and different. So being able to read, like if it's one person, it's one to focus on, but when there's 10 or 12 in the room, you just have to see all these different styles and sort of manage that in such a way that the message is understandable for everybody, but the pace as well.
I wanted to ask you one or two kind of funny little questions, which I was thinking specifically, this is about communication and conversation. So you studied in London at the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art, LAMDA. And you've done work here and obviously have lots of British and English friends. And then the work that I know you from is a collective of artists who are Dutch. And I was curious in terms of communication. I have a probably much more shallow answer to this because I have less experience than you do with both cultures.
Yeah.
What do you think that any major differences are in terms of your experience with regards to conversation and communication between Dutch and British culture?
I'm not saying this happens with all Dutchies because it looks like it, but for me, for sure, I'm quite direct. I say what I see and I make things explicit and I don't use too many words to say it. And maybe within the English culture, there's a very nice introduction and then there's a message and then there's a very nice outro. So you sort of had this whole conversation to just say, you just did this and I find that very uncomfortable. And
I'm just laughing because my experience, I mean, I loved coming over to work with you guys and with your company when I had the opportunity to do it because there was something, I mean, like, I agree with you. It's not all Dutch. It's not all British. Obviously there's a spectrum within it.
Yeah.
But I just, I'd moved from Canada to the UK and I was kind of adjusting to that way of communicating. Because even though Canada and UK, both English, kind of Canada was a British colony, part of the empire and all that kind of stuff, I do find it quite different in terms of its directness. And so working with the Dutch group that you run was so fun and funny and refreshing because of that bluntness, because of that boldness, because of that, once you get over the uncomfortable kind of getting to the point.
Yeah, just say it. Yeah.
I was wondering if you were going to say that.
No, just say it. I mean, I agree. I mean, I think that's what we do. I think a lot of the times too, when it's funny because I work nationally and internationally when I do training and coaching work as well. And sometimes people say, yeah, but our culture is different. And maybe you should be a bit careful to say it like that. And we just use more words. And eventually we're just all people trying to be understood, right? And yes, we communicate different, but I think that's I've learned over time that it does not matter whether I train or coach somebody from, well, it does and it doesn't, right? So I have people from India, from Russia, from Spain, from Holland, from Belgium, from England, like all over the place, from the States. Eventually, if you are really interested in somebody, you ask good questions, you really want to listen and to understand what they're saying, then the language is universal. There's no difference in that. But maybe a Dutch culture might ask the question just a bit sooner than somebody that comes from India, for example, because they might just wait a bit longer before they formulate the question. But eventually, when you ask it, it's still, we might make it a lot harder on ourselves than it actually is. I don't know.
I just thought of this. It might be a difficult question so if you can't think of something, that's okay. But has there been any conversations in your life you can think of personally, professionally, creatively, in whatever avenue that really stand out as transformative conversations, whether they were difficult, easy, hilarious moments maybe that changed things for you?
I think it depends on from which angle. I always like it myself, but that's my personal journey. So what I find a difficult conversation is, for example, saying, I'm not going to work with you anymore, or I'm going to choose to say no to a specific something. And what always mesmerizes me is if I do that, new doors do open, right? So once you start setting your boundaries and you speak up and you have that difficult conversation, something new always arises. So I think that's what always, for me, creates magic, that whenever I had a difficult conversation, I'm like, oh, okay, well, this was hard. It was hard to say, I'm sorry, but I think we're going to go into different directions. And then the next day somebody gives me a ring out of nowhere and says, hey, Amber, are you busy next year? So that I always find magical. What I always find, but that's more to do with my profession, I love it when I get like either emails or people call me and they say like, I dared to take a step in life, Amber. I had the conversation and I'm doing something that I really, really like right now. That somehow within my conversations that I had with my coach, something started, like there was a seed that was planted and they looked after it themselves and made choices that helps them further in life. So I find that. So it's not maybe within conversations. It's usually what happens afterwards. So maybe the conversation is the starting point of creating something new.
So those difficult conversations where you're setting boundaries, you were talking about, and then a new door opens. I guess I was thinking one of the last things I'd love to hear from you is if someone were listening to this and they had something like that they had to approach, whether it be changing part of their job or a relationship, or they wanted to move and they wanted to tell their family, something that affects other people and that could be perceived in a negative way. There might be something about curiosity in this, but what would you advise as a first step?
If somebody would want to make a choice, but they're not sure how to voice it.
And entering into the conversation in a way. If someone doesn't have you coming into the, to sort of facilitate, but it's something that they maybe have to approach themselves or something.
Yeah. So people start reading between the lines quite easily. So if we are not explicit, we make assumptions based on what we see and what we feel. So I think my biggest tip would be say what's happening in that moment. Just tell people, I'm very scared to say what I'm about to say, or this is very difficult for me to voice, or I'm actually really, really nervous to do this and this and this. Starting the conversation with making that explicit just gives room for other people to go like, oh.
I think clarity is there's a phrase out there with clarity is kindness as well. It's like explicit. Yeah. I love what you're saying about kind of acknowledge what you're feeling.
Yeah.
And also just being clear and explicit, I think, rather than, I think sometimes people enter these situations and they try to cushion it and soften it, but that can be confusing.
It makes it very confusing. And it usually ends up like people are misinterpreting, and then the emotions come in and then they stop listening, because when you're emotional, your ears don't function anymore. And before you know it, you're like, yeah, see, I'm not the person to have these difficult conversations. I'm not going to have them anymore. That's what happens usually.
My final question is, I like to ask people in the audience as well as our guests how they are fostering a sense of connection and community in the coming week. And I call this a parish notice. So I just wanted to ask if there's anything that you're doing in the coming week that will foster a sense of connection and community with anyone, a group, a friend, family, anything that you're doing.
So I'm doing a performance at this moment, and it's called Attempts to Say Goodbye. And this is it's not a theater show, it's a theatrical experiment. And what we do is we have rituals to help to transfer, to say goodbye, or to let go. So the theatrical experiment is about doing different rituals to say goodbye, and it brings in people that are dealing with issues in life, whether it's they just lost somebody, they're losing somebody, whether it's because they have Alzheimer, they're losing their own thoughts, whether it's because their family does not want to see them anymore for the choices they made in life. So anyway, and that creates a sense of community, right? So you end up with yesterday 45 visitors that all are trying to find a place where they can share their story that's being heard in order for them to say goodbye and move forward or transition or give that more attention.
Wow. I mean, talk about talking to the perfect person about conversations. Not only is that about connection, but it's, how to say goodbye. That's the beginning of a very difficult conversation or moment.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think that's it. Well, thank you so much. We have so much to catch up on. And honestly, it is really lovely to hear your voice and hear about all the things that you're doing. That sounds like an incredible performance you did yesterday. And thanks for talking to us on The Big Smoke about conversations.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. In each show, we like to hear how you are fostering connection and community. We call this a parish notice.
Hello, my name is Divyesh and I'm in Bangalore, India. My parish notice to foster a sense of community is through theatre, because I'm a director and we direct musicals in India. I think musicals are the best way for me to bring communities together, to bring different age groups together, to bring a lot of people together, because it starts with so much of chaos and leads to something that is so wonderful and a beautiful creation at the end of the day. And just people coming together, people bringing their energy and excitement, their experience to the table, I think, and the young ones are learning from their seniors. The seniors are driving off the energy of the juniors. And I think it fosters a beautiful sense of community, theatre, and also strengthens community. So for me, it's a joy to see communities coming together through theatre.
Hi, I'm Jack, and I'm currently in Japan. My parish notice is about finding connection and community. Being here in a country where they speak pretty minimal English, it's been quite difficult to make connections with people, especially the locals. But one way around that is when we've been staying in hotels, the reception people usually speak quite good English. So we've kind of made a conscious effort to get to know them and just ask them how their day is. And from that, that's led to learning a bit more how they live their life. And yeah, it's been pretty interesting and pretty positive. So yeah, just kind of going above and beyond to make an effort to even just learn the staff members at restaurants also.
Hi, I am Marguerite.
And I'm Jim.
We are in Lincoln, California.
In tribute to our town's namesake, President Abraham Lincoln, our parish notice is to promote connection following the recent election.
We make an effort to chat with our neighbors who support Donald Trump based on things we all relate to. The neighbor who watches her grandkids while her daughter works. The disabled Marine veteran who loves to work on his boat. The neighbor who cares for her dogs.
President Lincoln encouraged this same sentiment following our tragic Civil War. In a small way, we are trying to do the same.
Hi, I'm Britt. I'm currently in Brisbane, Australia, and my parish notice is that I've been finding connection by seeing how many plants I can adopt before it becomes a problem. I've also been making an effort to talk to neighbours without accidentally committing to long-term plans. Recently, I also joined a local run club. It's been a great way to meet people and pretend I'm more athletic than I actually am.
Hi, my name is Thomas Boutillier. I'm in Paris, France, and my parish notice is to draw people while I am on the métro. And if I can, I will offer it to them before they get off at their stop. It's a great exercise for me to draw while having a time restraint, and it's a wonderful, simple gift to give to a complete stranger. However, now my sketchbook is unfortunately full of people that are simply on their phones. So what I've done to combat this is I have put a sticker on the back of my phone, similar to the style of a warning on a cigarette box, which says, "Les réseaux sociaux nuisent à la santé mentale." Social media harms your mental health. So drawing people, offering it to them, and encouraging others to get off their phone is my parish notice.
Hey, my name's Kitty. I'm currently on Sabre Rock in the British Virgin Islands. And my parish notice is I'm so lucky to be able to be here with an amazing group of friends. We all go out and do some pretty awesome stuff on lifeboats, so it's nice to be able to escape and just have a bit of pleasure on the water and enjoying each other's company.
Hey, I'm Jamie. I'm currently in Brisbane, Australia, and my parish notice is, after a year of travelling, I'm back to figuring out how to live in one place without constantly packing a bag. I've been finding connection by chatting with strangers at the local coffee shop and seeing how long it takes before they ask why I'm not at work. I'm also trying to spend more time outdoors and appreciate the slower pace. Turns out there's a lot to enjoy when you're not constantly on the move.
Hi, my name's Rishi. I'm in Cornwall at the moment, and my parish notice is, forgot what I was going to say. Hold on, let me just check my calendar. Weird thing about my calendar. My calendar is a climbing frame in a way. All straight lines and empty space, if you know what I mean. A pigeon flies past the window almost as if it's been dropped. It's winter and I've got a fluffy jumper on, as per. I check my phone, I'm worried about my eyes turning into giant pixels and becoming a fly in a nice blue wool jumper. No, I put my phone away, turning it on its face so it can't look at me either. I've turned my attention to the bars, the lines and the numbers on my calendar, and at the ready-made inserts such as New Year's Eve. My bug-like eyes linger there as I worry about a new me, wondering if this time I'll make the eyebrows slightly higher and the lips slightly redder, and perhaps take the old heart out of the freezer to thaw in the bath. Listen to it crackle as it hits the H2O. I've also got a spiritual teacher on my speaker harping on about negative self-talk, timelessness or something along those lines. I sip a coffee, the coffee that was a gift, a bean I'd like, they said. Single origin with powerful rounded chocolate notes, they promised. I sat there sipping and sucking like it was going out of fashion, like a woodland creature with its mouth around a dropped seed trying ever so hard to squeeze out every morsel of promised enjoyment, their disappointed face popping into my head with every hurtful attempt to taste the chocolate notes. I look once again at the vast climbing frame that was this month on my calendar. Had nothing to lose, so I took what felt like a deep breath, reached forwards and grabbed onto one of the bars, wind tousling the hairs on my head like it didn't give a crap about personal space. The top of the box of Tuesday the 6th felt like a good place to start. I held on. I let my feet dangle. I let my shoulders bear the weight. They could make themselves useful for once, I thought. And I hung there, feeling the space below me, teetering on the edge of this could actually be quite dangerous if I'm not careful. I shimmied along quite quaintly to Wednesday the 7th, wondering if the feeling in the air might change. It had not. I jumped down to the 14th now, just about able to keep my footing thanks to the grip of my shoes, balancing with what I considered the precision of a lemur. "You're welcome," rumbled the trainers on my feet that kept me afloat now and always. The trainer on the left said "you're," and the trainer on the right said "welcome," and it was at this point I thought enough was enough and it was time to leave the house. I turned off the man's voice on the speaker as he began to go on about negative energy. I'd clearly zoned out, fled so far from the present moment that even the footwear at the end of my pegs had something to say about the state of affairs. I downed the rest of the coffee like a brute and set out into the street, coffee hues like fumes of promise emanating from my face area. Got myself to the park, as today was a day for me and for me alone. Chance to sit with it all and let it all settle in. Acceptance commitment therapy, they call it in certain circles. I observed the geese and I wondered how they recovered from an everyday bicker, and if they got intrusive thoughts too. I strolled over to the climbing frame, the mini play park for youngsters up to the age of probably 11, one that as a child felt mountainous to me, a monumental chance to prove to both myself and strangers that I was an agile thing capable of fitting myself into boxes or squeezing through tiny gaps like a mouse, through a tiny doorway, disguised as a crack in the wall, or to spend time testing the boundaries of this and that, in the knowledge that a slip of the hand could mean curtains for me or a plaster on the knee or the elbow. It became apparent to me that I was now a different thing, a longer person, a broader person with denser bones and thicker skin, and part of me, a tiny leaf in the forest that I call myself, wanted to tear the whole thing down, to pull apart the climbing frame because it no longer serves me and no one uses it anyway, to revolt against a past, to force through a resurgence in the present, to tear it limb by limb and to use the ropes and coloured metal bars to create a monument for the seasons, a warrior, if you like, with broad stance and eyes that could actually see the wind in a way that we can't, in colours and stripes and waves. The warrior would survey the land as part of its natural instinct, hear calls, hear every cry for help and rejoice in each moment of true jubilation, whether minute or communal. I checked myself and realised I had neither the strength, nous, nor the artistic prowess to do such a thing, despite having taken up the stance of the aforementioned warrior, only to be frightened out of it by a passing growler of a dog that seemed to have a problem with me. I resisted the urge to growl back, swallowed it even, and I felt it mixing in my stomach with the coffee from earlier in a cocktail of, let's call it what it is, anxiety. My trainers squeaked, the right with what might be the sweetest utterance of the word damn in history, and the left spluttered it in a way that actually sounded quite spiteful. Damn it. Damn it. Fuck it, if you like. I scurried off back home like an absolute rat, tail between my legs, afraid of the shorter days, running like an action movie rat hero from a dust cloud without a sexy soiled white vest and sweat and blood. The rest of the evening was a frame-by-frame study into sighing and head in hands kind of behaviour, and so, drowning in this cocktail of darker days, I fell into a snooze. The next day was sun-fueled from the off, and as I woke I was aware I was in a new box, in today's climbing frame box. I had scrawled last week the faint words, "do something new," in a biro that was clearly running out. Gotta be done, I muttered to myself, do something new. I had grown into myself slightly in recentish times. I was perched comfortably on a heart-shaped tree in the forest inside me, away from the forest's floor, safe from the risk of being or becoming a giant raindrop to hit the leaves and the mud down below. Come on, I said to myself, pull yourself together, kid. I stretched like a starfish and got on with the morning. Do you want to grab a bite to eat for breakfast? The day proposed. Phew, do I responded, the words scratching on my face as they left my mouth. I nibbled on bits and bobs and then looked out of the window at the city, wondering about them all. I kind of wanted to experience it, part of me. Perhaps this was a promise of movement from the tree perch. Part of me wanted to experience them. And the anxiety from yesterday had escaped into my dreams like a runaway train, and I was a new person, I told myself. A biscuit, if you like, ready to be crumbled and sprinkled over the town like the topping on a deconstructed cheesecake. And so, I walked the pavements like a super confident young man, shoulders back, chest out kind of vibe, and just as I was getting into a rhythm, a kindly person, to be fair, stood on the street with leaflets, asks me if I want to visit the aquarium. I tell them I don't love the idea of sea-dwelling creatures living in tight boxes above the ground, but I thought I had nothing to lose. Try something new. I strolled in. There was no queue. The attraction had, if I'm being honest, fallen into disrepair, and I read the information on the walls about certain types of coral which I decided only to skim over, due to their use of the Comic Sans font, which made me uncomfortable. There was so much more to see than text on a wall, I thought, I hoped. So much more to experience, even in this aquarium that felt like it, like me, had slightly gone under. I turned a corner into yet another information display about stingrays. I thought about their bodies and their flatness, and just as the whole thing was starting to give me the creeps, I could feel a glow to my left and a shimmering out of the corner of my eye, and there it was. Great big glass box, absolutely crammed with fish and sharks and paper-thin rays and other squidgy-looking things with prehistoric eyes. They were all there, going about their day-to-day, gliding, biting, aimless, busy, and most perfect. I wanted to be in there, to be wrapped up in their world and cling film, to be a swimmer, to commune within their boundaries. A tear fell from my eye, and I wondered in my drop of salty brine whether I could be home to something like this, an ecosystem, a storm, whether each drop held bodies itself, whether these bodies felt submerged or lost in space, whether they spoke and cried or spluttered, or whether they were tuned into one another in the same way lovers might be under covers keeping one another warm. I ran out of the aquarium and I purchased a very big glass container, my tank, my big fucking tank. I got a group of lads to help me carry the thing to the top of the hill that overlooked not just this town but miles around other towns with their folk, their flavours and sounds. I tipped the lads with Kit Kats and a bowl of hot lentils and zoomed down to street level. I was a picture of glee. I was finally trying something new, my scarf flailing behind me trying to keep up with my giddy ideas. I went into shops like M&S and dragged fairly elderly folk out, some kicking and screaming, some silently compliant. I prodded and pulled them up the hill to get in my glass box. "You're coming with me," I said to a gentleman with grey hair and a scarf I learned was from John Lewis, and I carried him on my back all the way up due to his dodgy hips. He was telling me about his kitty. I didn't ask who or what his kitty was, but I enjoyed the gentle hum of his voice and the mild enthusiasm of one who had known the touch of unanswerable love. I went into places of worship and I told them all about my idea. Some folk came, others continued in prayer, and some even complained to the authorities about my disturbance. I went into community centres and leisure centres and I told them it won't take long and this will be even better than your game of badminton. A group of youngsters and their respective adults in the middle of a birthday party of a 12-year-old lad called Milo asked me if it counted toward their Duke of Edinburgh award, and I said yes, to which the whole family responded with appreciation and enthusiasm, and there it was, a tank, my tank on the highest point in the highest hill in the town, packed to the brim with folk. Some stood, some sat, all of them staring at me with the eyes of deer in the night at a big headlight, which I assumed was me. I was stood outside the tank admiring it all, catching my breath. By the look on their lovely faces, I think they wanted a speech. Bygone friends had done this to me on my landmark birthdays, the very same look of expectation or explanation, probably just a speech is what they wanted. I suppose I had promised them something, in a way. I thought it'd just be nice, I said. All of us together, you know, and look around us. Isn't nature beautiful? This feels perfect. We're like fish. Yeah, we could be like fish, yeah. Because fish just get on with it, don't they? Don't know about you guys, but I think it's nice for us all to get together once in a while like this. This just feels fab, doesn't it, all of us here? I was met with silence, apart from a young voice asking Dad if they were having fish and chips for tea, and if that's what I was talking about. Dad told the youngster to shush. "You're mad," croaked a voice. "Let us out, you maniac. I've got Mabel's charity tea tonight, and the pumpkins aren't going to turn themselves into soup, are they?" I suppose I became slightly defensive at this rude interlude. "You're right," I said. "You do have Mabel's tea, and the pumpkins won't turn themselves into soup. How could they? I just wish we could all just... Come on. Let us all just take a deep breath and reconnect, recollect, collect, because my calendar is like a climbing frame. Does that make sense? And my hands are sore, and I'm worried about my shoulders and my fingers and my joints. Oh, I'm reaching for self-respect above the parapet, but drowning in the promise of sunset. Look, I'm chaotic, okay? I'm the first to admit. You called me a maniac, but the fact is I'm more than that. Take maniac and multiply it by the numbers of lines in a month, the ins and outs, the ever-rising mental word count. I just thought this would count for something other than... A couple in their 30s clicked their fingers as per spoken word tradition at my outburst, but stopped soon after noticing everybody else in the aquarium had grown slightly tired of me already, and frankly a bit chilly, at which they quickly adjusted their behaviour by rubbing their clickless hands together and hugging each other as if onlookers at the periphery of some kind of accident. It suddenly dawned on me that the folk didn't look like fish in the aquarium. Not at all. None of these were paper-thin and effortless like the stingrays. These looked reticent. Exhausted by my vain attempts to rob them from their lives, from a charity tea, from the sports matches, from their M&S. The sun was threatening to set, and I felt defeated. The promise of a new day had turned me into some mad scientist type, and that's not the role I had ever intended to step into. Myers-Briggs test told me I was a mediator more than anything else. I looked at my aquarium, fairly disgusted with what I'd created, and fell to my knees dramatically, sick of glass boxes and both filled and empty space. I was inconsolable. Head in hands, I heard a crunching, a mechanical sound of footsteps, not dissimilar to the thrum of a football hitting a crossbar, and then a breathing, a heaving of sorts. There stood a warrior, all made of climbing frame. I felt something step over me and take 4 paces forwards. Looking up, the warrior had taken up the position of something that was about to smash the aquarium I had created, and so, for want of a better phrase, the warrior shattered the whole thing. Families and individuals came flooding out, and I wondered if they were the water rather than the fish, as their hands held me to get me back on my feet, as their words told me things to help me breathe slower, as they wrapped scarves around me. As soon as I could open my eyes again, I saw the warrior had vanished, or rather, turned itself back into a climbing frame, which now stood at the top of the hill, at the highest point in town, newly inhabited by youngsters and adults alike. The lowering sun holding its setting for a time, commemorative even, all in the interest of trying something new.
Were you stumped? At the start of the show, I asked you what the largest diamond in the world was, taken from the sports and leisure category of Trivial Pursuit. And the answer is a baseball diamond. Now, this question was apparently one of Trivial Pursuit co-creator Chris Haney's favorites. Questions such as this contributed to the game's widespread appeal, blending factual trivia with clever puns. It's that time again. Victorian parlor games. All games, from the Roman gladiatorial battles to a quiet round of cards or charades, are imitations of real-life situations. The activity of playing games is the expression of an instinct, for play is far older than culture, older even than prehistory. So here's our offering to you, a way to connect with your friends and family and have a bit of fun. For today's game, we are hopping across the channel to the Netherlands for Spieskepoepen or Nagelpoepen. In other words, nail pooping. Spieskepoepen is a quirky and humorous traditional Dutch game enjoyed at parties, festivals, and social gatherings. Here's how to play. The setup. Tie a string around each participant's waist with a nail attached to the end dangling behind them. Place a bottle, typically a glass bottle with a narrow neck, on the ground. Now, the objective is to lower the nail into the bottle by carefully maneuvering and controlling movements of the hips and body without using the hands. In other words, poop your nail into that bottle. Now, some rules. The players must not touch the string or nail with their hands. The first player to successfully land the nail in their bottle wins. If played in teams, the next participant begins once their teammate succeeds. You can do a single bottle setup where the players take turns attempting to poop the nail into the same bottle with the fastest or most successful player winning, or you can do a multiple bottle setup. Each player has their own bottle and they compete simultaneously to see who can succeed first. My Dutch isn't perfect, but Spieskepoepen exemplifies the Dutch cultural value of gezelligheid, a term that embodies coziness, togetherness, and social bonding. Its lighthearted nature makes it a perfect fit for family-friendly celebrations and community events. Whether played during a national holiday, at a children's party, or simply as a fun icebreaker, Spieskepoepen remains a beloved game that reflects the playful spirit of Dutch culture. Well, that's all for today's episode. I really enjoyed our trip around the world, and I hope you did too. As I mentioned at the start of the show, our final live recording of the year is December 13th. There'll be cheese, there'll be games, there'll be Christmas stories, and much, much more. We hope to see you there. Thanks for listening. Well, so long until we meet again. I'm so glad that you were here, my friends. And the time may be fast, but good friendships will last. So long until we meet again. Good night, everybody.